Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How's it going, everybody? It's me, Comic Crack. What's happening? So this is the first Sunday wrap from the new kind of setup. This is kind of the space that I have here, elbow to elbow. I was talking to Rasa this afternoon. We'd had our chat this afternoon on my channel. So if you're curious to go back and listen to us ramble about comics and various other things, including a really off-topic conversation at the end about violence in cities and the escalation of such, go and check that out. But one of the things we were talking about, so I got a couple of new cabinets. I got a new bookshelf here as well too, just a thin one that I've got some stuff on. I think I've talked about it a little bit, and I think there was a short, pulled out some of the bigger books that I can get to. I'm living with it so far. I'm not 100% on this one. This one has magazines in it. It does come into the space a little bit. I'm finding it okay so far. 50-50 that it's going to stay. The whole point was to kind of get boxes of comics off the floor. Pardon me. Get books off the floor, which I've succeeded at. And then there's another short filing cabinet over here that holds, I think it's 2 drawers, and I think it has probably 5 short boxes in it, 5 or 6 short boxes in it. They're pretty deep drawers, and they're wide enough that you can do 2 rows. I think in each drawer, actually, there's probably 6 short boxes on it. It's a short box and a half for each row. I put some padding in at the front and the back just to space things so I could actually get to all the comics. So that's solved a huge problem. I got to reorganize some of these shelves down here, or these drawers down here, which was always nice to do. So the beauty with that short one is it now is kind of acts as like a table too. It's the perfect height. When I bring my chair up to it, I can pull out some of these bigger books and lay them on that surface. One of the books that we haven't talked about since I got it was this Thimble Theater second edition, revised and expanded second printing from Fantagraphics. Colin Blanchette, shout out to Colin. This was something that he talked about in one of his previews videos quite a while back. So I've always wanted to dig into some of this stuff. I've often heard good things about it. So I pre-ordered it. It came in, I don't know, I think I picked it up maybe a month ago at this point. I just haven't really talked about it because I haven't really read too much of it. I've started reading it because of that nice setup. It's beautiful to sit there, and it opens up perfectly on that space. I got to say, I'm genuinely getting a pretty big kick out of this so far. It's kind of legitimately funny. There's some really good strips in here. It's amazing to see it at that size. This is all pre-Popeye stuff. I think that at the back, there's one strip where there's kind of I don't know if it's considered the first appearance of Popeye or not. I haven't read all the material that's in this book, like the history and stuff. I haven't dug into. It also comes with, where did I put it? Comes with a little newspaper insert where you get a few comics. Right here. So you get just a little 2-pager of some big, some Sunday comics there. And there's Jeep on the back there. So that's pretty cool. Using that as sort of a bookmarker of sorts for where I've read. So once I've kind of gone through this some more and read this some more, we'll definitely show this off and talk about it on the channel at some point, because I do feel like it'll be a nice one to look at. I also dug into my Peanuts Artist Edition again, which was glorious to dig into. I did a short about it. Those 2 pages I thought were incredible to see. That early stuff, it's truly amazing to see the crispness of his line. Like it's probably one of the books that out of my entire collection that I pull out the most. And every single time I flip through it, I'm stunned by the crispness of Schultz's line in that early stuff, especially, and the beautiful panel layouts and the way he plays with expressions, all sorts of things. There's just it really speaks to me. Like, this is, this is definitely one of those things that are nostalgic for me. Peanuts and Charlie Brown and all that is really part of my childhood. I've talked about it before. We still watch the Charlie Brown Christmas every year with the kids. I've got the soundtrack on vinyl. I've got some other Vince Guaraldi stuff on vinyl as well too. It's really something to sit there. So I really got immersed in it for about an hour yesterday, the day before, whenever that was, that I did that little short, and just slowly read through a bunch of strips again that I've read a million times, and still am amazed by everything about it. So I'm loving that short filing cabinet is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. So before we get into it, the comic stuff, we should talk about a couple of things. Hey, what do we got? Probably the biggest news is the ICC issuing arrest warrants for Netanyahu. What the heck is his name? Sorry, I apologize. Names were live, and all of a sudden I forget names. Another person in his cabinet, I'm sure the name will come to me, and then one of the Hamas leaders that Netanyahu, not Israel rather, has said that they've killed. So I wanted to draw your attention to this by a guy named Frank Barat. I'm not familiar with this individual. I am very familiar, though, with Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for Israel, for Palestine, I guess, for the genocide that's going on. She's written a couple of reports. We've talked about her before on the channel. She was recently in Canada to meet with some people. She had some incredible appearances on the news. You can see that Frank has also talked to the amazing Gabor Mate as well. But this one is really, really good because she does a good job of outlining what all this means. What does this mean for participating countries? What are their responsibilities? She also talks a little bit about the potential for now that this is kind of cracked open, is there an opportunity where other people could be brought to court, brought to the Hague, basically? So it doesn't end things. It doesn't end the suffering that's still going on. It doesn't end the bombing campaigns. It doesn't put a stop to anything, but it is a positive step forward. And she says similar things that I think a lot of us felt. There was this sense of elation when that news broke. But I think that it's pretty quickly tempered with, okay, well, we've still got a long way to go, but God damn it, is it satisfying that we're at this space. And I think that it's important to kind of fully understand what that means. So this one does a really good job of that. I'm sure there's other videos out there too. I'm sure there's other news organizations. I'm sure Al Jazeera has done something about it too, but this is the one that I've seen. I haven't dug too much into what other news agencies are talking about. I would draw your attention to this one. As usual, I'm going to try to do my best to put links in the description of this. Good evening, Gore Vidal. How are you? Let's see here. So I guess I'm going to have to stop sharing before I share another screen because I want to show you two more things. Another hero of mine, Kshama Sawant, did an amazing. I'm going to be watching this again because I want to take some clips for it to play on my radio show. She did an incredible half-hour conversation for Workers Strike Back and her channel On Strike. Kshama Sawant on the next steps for the movement. She was on the podcast with the Do Dissidents boys, who I'm a big fan of. And this was pretty close to after the election. And one of the things that she says there, which they also mirrored, which I completely agree with. Yes, sure, let's spend 30 seconds analyzing what happened, but God damn it, we got a lot of work to do. So she's that type of person, like, okay, this is what we've done. Let's look at our successes. Let's look at what we were able to change and what we were able to affect. And let's now talk about moving forward as a party, as basically a group. So she really spells out what her plans are and what she thinks should be done next. she's an amazing, amazing woman. I hope she's as respected as I respect her, because I could listen to her talk all day, and she definitely has no problem speaking her mind, which I really, really admire. So if you don't know Kshama Sawant, we have talked about her before. I will link this video in the description of this as well, because it's worth your time, no matter what side of the party lines you fall on. And honestly, even if you do fall on the party lines, maybe listening to something like this can move you away from that, because we do need to move away from that kind of system. As you well know, my thoughts on, I haven't made it, I haven't shied away from talking about it. So that one, and the last one I wanted to draw your attention to before we talk glorious comic books is Whitney Webb. Is someone who I've followed for a long time on social media, Twitter specifically. She used to write for Mint Press News. She doesn't anymore. She's got her own thing going on. It's called Unlimited Hangout. I'll show you that in 1 second. She recently made an appearance with Brianna Joy Gray on Brianna's Bad Faith podcast, and it was a fantastic conversation. It was fantastic, mainly to see her absolutely blow Brianna's mind. I think she really had an effect on her in that conversation. Whitney is an unbelievable human being with the kind of recall of a Noam Chomsky when she talks about details. It's incredible. Pardon me, the information that she can recall. And again, this is very loosely based on some conversations. Obviously, with any of her arguments, I haven't dug into the weeds about every detail. As I was listening to this conversation, though, there was a couple of times she brought stuff up, and while she was chatting, I went and did some searches to see if those links did exist that she was claiming in this video. And of course, I was met with absolutely, those are links. This is as good as the Bad Faith podcast conversation is. I think this one with Sabby Sabs is just that little bit better. It's an hour long. And again, she does the same thing of just mind-blowing information and talking about links and talking about the futility of participating in elections when it comes to presidential elections, prime minister elections, that level of elections, doing things locally, focusing on being local, spending some time offline, going out and talking to real human beings, et cetera, et cetera. So as much as there's a lot of the conversation that really feels like it knocks you down, that holy shit, we don't have a chance, I think she does a really good job of bringing in that uplifting kind of positive, like, listen, this is understanding the world that you're existing in is the greatest way to combat it and to move forward. So I think that's where she tends to come from this. She does have some books out. I've never read any of them, but her kind of recent resurgence in this YouTube kind of world and interviews, because I've watched a couple of interviews with her actually over the past few days, and they've all been magnificent in one way or the other. Seeing all this stuff gets me interested in reading her books and looking more into the kind of things that she's talking about. And I'll show you her website here. Sorry, Gore Vidal, I'll be right back and we'll see your comment there. I do see you commenting. I'm not ignoring you. So here's her Unlimited Hangout. There's podcasts. She does articles on here. I think she has some people that write with her as well. I believe that this Unlimited Hangout is her mainly, with some contributors. One of her big kind of claims to fame, I guess, in kind of the wider range was her work digging into Jeffrey Epstein and everything that was involved with that, and how long in history sex has been used as a method of blackmail in various degrees throughout kind of political history. She breaks some of that stuff down in the interviews. So like I said, if you don't know her, absolutely come and look into some of this stuff and listen to what she has to say about things. And yeah, then you can go from there. Let's see. Here in Texas, the State Education Board approved by a vote of 8-7, a Bible curriculum for elementary schools. It will be challenged in federal court, but the Supreme Court is very different now. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've been hearing, that's a very real, these are my words, that's a very real danger I see religion mixing with school, religion mixing with politics. Doesn't matter what the religion is, as something that concerns me strongly as just a human being living on this earth. Not saying that people can't choose to pray in schools and do what they want to do themselves, but having kind of government mandated, or rather in this case, state mandated Bible studies or anything like that is very concerning. Yeah, it's happening in other states. I have heard that as well too, Gore. That is something. Cool. So there's a bunch of stuff for you to look into if you so choose. So why don't we get into some stuff that we've read, and why don't we start with this one? So it's been a little bit for me to get this. There was a delay in the shipment, which is why I didn't have this earlier. I think this came out quite a few weeks ago at this point. I want to say like 3 weeks, possibly 4 weeks ago. 3 weeks probably. So it didn't get into my shop. Thankfully, they got one in, and I didn't realize how thankful I was until I opened the inside cover and saw that this is a limited print run of 300. This is the first print. This is the brand new Matt Howarth. It's called Termite Mound. And there's politics throughout this as well too. So this is Cosmic Lion Productions. One of the things, let's focus on this because it did make it to our graphic for tonight's stream. Brendan Graham does a little pinup on the inside back cover. As we've spoken about before, Brendan Graham is a big Howarth fan as well too. So this was a nice surprise to see. So 3 issues coming out. Very excited about this new Matt Howarth stuff. I've also been reading some do I have it out? No, I don't even have it out. The magazine, the Fantagraphics one, Particle Dreams. I have one more issue of that to read, so we'll probably talk about that next week. I've got 4 out of the 5 issues. There was 5 issues total, so I'm missing one of them. But that's been pretty fun as well. This one was great. It's great to see Howarth back. I love him. This is the Termite Mound. Basically, the very basic premise of this is that the kind of ruling class lives in this mountain here, which the everybody else, the citizens, call the Termite Mound. And there's a group, a fringe, quote unquote, fringe group that's looking to take down the Termite Mound, and they're trying to organize as best as they can. While they're kind of stuck organizing, every once in a while you get an individual who decides, screw it, I'm climbing this damn mound and I'm going to take care of things myself. So that's kind of how our story opens. Our main character here is sort of like a Jim Corrigan, because inside him is this spirit that lives and can be kind of set free to attack anything coming for him while he continues his ascent of the Termite Mound. So we get a little bit of that. And then we eventually meet our other main characters that are going to be in this story. Both are from this sort of fringe political group here, I guess, or maybe not even political group. They're more, not quite anarchist group, but they are definitely a revolutionary, part of a revolutionary force to take down the Termite Mound. And they sort of get thrown into the mix as well too. So great first issue. Looking forward to the other 2. Yeah, it's Matt Howarth. I mean, over the past year, I feel like we've talked about him a hell of a lot on the channel. So I don't know what's left of this. I don't know if Cosmic Lion has a ton of stuff available on their website. I'm going to link them as well. I do have that website open. I just haven't looked. For those of you who know Sean Riaz, he has a comic out through Cosmic Lion as well too. So I'll make sure that I link their website down in the description too. I'll try to remember to do that right after the stream, so you can check some stuff out. So brand new Matt Howarth. One quick aside before we talk about things that I've fully read. I did want to briefly talk about this because I picked this up yesterday. So my pull list is pretty slim these days, especially now that Helen of Windhorn has ended, as well as Precious Metal. I don't have a gigantic pull list as it is, so I figured I've been wanting to give this a try for quite a while. That Texas Blood by Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips. So I read the first issue of this, and honestly, I had to put it down. This main sheriff character, I didn't notice it until they pointed out themselves in the story that he says, well, quite often. Well, I guess that means that, well, I don't know about that, ma'am. Well, da-da-da-da-da, well. And when his wife kind of makes fun of him for doing it, that is all I could fucking see for the rest of the issue, was the amount of times this motherfucker says, well. And honestly, it drove me fucking crazy. And then another character starts saying, well, every other word. And I think that I understand you want to give this guy some character and you want to do this, but it's such overkill to the point of I just was able to finish that first issue. And I'm so glad, because I was actually going to pick up the first 2 volumes of this. I'm really glad I didn't, because then I would be extra pissed, because I'm going to give the second issue a chance at some point. But honestly, that's enough to drive me off the story. And I know that sounds really petty, but it really just drew my attention to it, and I couldn't see anything else. And it just was driving me fucking mental. So, well, there you have it. Kablam. So, I mean, other than that, it seems like an interesting story. I know that it's related to that massacre, the Enfield Gang massacre that I was reading, that I know that was kind of part of the history of this story. So I would really like to give it a chance. I will give it a shot. Well, Chris Condon is new writer on Green Arrow. Well, I hope that goes okay for him. And then on top of that, my wife has been watching Yellowstone. Nothing against that show. What I've watched is phenomenal. But those guys talking like this all the time, and everything is that serious, and I got a rock in my boot, and I just don't know what to do. It just, some of those kind of things, I understand why they happen, but it can be kind of comical at times. We're just watching 1883 right now, actually. And it started off so strong, and we're about 5 episodes in, and it is really sunk like a fucking stone. Honestly, the writing has taken an absolute nosedive, which was a little disappointing. I have such little patience for TV as it is. If you're not going to hook me, I kind of lose interest. But once you get 5 episodes in, you feel kind of obligated to finish it off. So I do want to try to stick with it, because I've heard that both of those prequels to Yellowstone are really fantastic. So I do want to give it a chance. But I tell you, it's a little tough. So anyway, that's this one. We'll see if I get into it anymore. I really do want to give it a chance. Like, I really honestly do. But that shit'll drive you to drink. So we'll put that there in the reading cube of the shelf. And since I had to take this one out, let's talk about this one. So this is Kowloon Generic Romance. So I had heard about this on that woman's channel who's an architect, who talks about the Blom manga that we've talked about before, those first 2 volumes. She has a video where she talks about this walled city in China, this Kowloon, and she does talk about this manga in it. Now, the first half of this was a pretty tough read. It is a romance book. We have our main female character and our main male character. They live in Kowloon, and they are real estate agents for specific areas within Kowloon. And they have this romantic relationship, ? He kind of treats her like not quite shit, but he's not the nicest to her. And of course, she's in love with him, she realizes. So that was a little grating at times, and it just didn't make for very interesting reading. So I really took a bit of time to read this. I kind of started really tackling it again the other night, and sit down and read like kind of the last half in one go, which I think was, I'm glad that I did that. So here's what I'd say about this. Half of the book is, again, my personal opinion, not really anything for me. I don't find it interesting at all. I find it a little dull. I find it a little silly. But what I will say is I didn't find the ending a little silly. I found the ending actually the one thing that really made me want to actually pick up a second volume. So I may pick up the second volume and give the second volume a chance. So they start to kind of get a little closer as far as spending time together. They spend a lot of time together at work anyway. They go and have some meals together. He takes her to a section of Kowloon that she's never been to before. And it's a little more rougher, and she ends up really loving it. They go kind of stall to stall and eating small amounts of food. And again, when I was in China, that really reminds me of stuff that we did in China, going to these areas and going and just sampling a bunch of food as you're kind of walking. You take a little break, you have some food, you have some drinks, then you go for a walk again and you hit another spot. A fantastic culture for eating, in my experience being there. So at one point, he takes her to a restaurant, or as she's sitting there eating watermelon and smoking a cigarette. She loves having watermelon and cigarettes. She thinks it's the best combination. And he ends up telling her that it's a really nice quirk. And it reminds me, I knew someone with that exact same quirk. And I really find that you can see that it really is, it's something that resonates with him pretty deeply from a past relationship. And that's kind of where it gets interesting, because we start to wonder who this person is. And then we also get stuff like this as well, too, who this person is that he had this relationship with. At one point, she finds a photo. She ends up wanting to go back to the restaurant that he brought her to. She can't find it. She finds a photo. We don't see until the end of what the photo is. It turns out it's a photo of the two of them together. So she goes, and now that she's found the photo, she's able to find this restaurant again. When she goes to the restaurant by herself, she's sitting there looking at the photo. And the waiter says, "That photo, that was a fun day, wasn't it?" And she says, "You know about when this was taken?" And he says, "I should hope so. I'm the one who took it right here at this cafe at your and Mr. Kudo's engagement party." Dun, dun, dun. So then we flip the page and we get her kind of sitting with that information. We flip the page one more time and we see that the surroundings are actually destroyed. So it really does a nice job of bringing into question, is this a fantasy? What the hell is going on here? Has she had some accident where she's lost her memory and Mr. Kudo is kind of playing along? Like, it feels like there's more of a mystery here. So that was kind of, because of that ending, I would like to kind of go from there and see kind of where this goes. I'd be curious to try this for one more volume. Again, a good reason of why I really try to finish something. You never know where a story is going to take you, even if there's parts that aren't working. Maybe it's a journey to something more. And this really felt like that I found half of it pretty dull with moments of interest. I like the stuff about Kowloon, the city itself. I thought that was pretty engaging. The city itself ends up feeling like a character, as stereotypical as that sounds. That's just a fact. So yeah, I'll probably give that another shot. What else do we got? Why don't we go with these ones first? Not much to say about Precious Metal. This was the final issue. I love this series. This issue didn't disappoint. I thought it tied everything together. Rasa and I had a good conversation about it this afternoon, where we dug into it a little bit more. One of the things that I was saying that I just found it, one of those stories where I didn't quite understand what the kind of overarching idea was that he was trying to convey to us. Anytime you're reading a story, there feels like there's maybe some sort of, not necessarily journey or something, but there's some kind of overarching idea that is kind of burrowed in with the story. This one doesn't make that clear exactly what that is, or at least nothing that I could kind of tap into. So talking it out with Rasa this afternoon kind of brought some things to mind that I think maybe helped me understand it a bit more. So that was good. But this has been a wonderful series, because when I'm involved in the story, that stuff doesn't bother me, because the journey through the story is so fun. The art is just stunning. Bertram and Hollingsworth are a hell of a team, and they knocked it out of the park all the way to this final issue. They didn't let up once. Great to see Bertram showing off some new art on his Instagram. So it is going to keep going in some form. Some story is coming next. We'll see what that is and when that happens. Hopefully the wait between the two is a lot less time than it was between Little Bird and this one. Last night, I sat down to have a flip through House of Penance. I've got a hardcover of it as well as the single issues. So I pulled out the hardcover and put it on the new kind of table filing cabinet here. Ended up reading it from front to back. Still a great story. Amazing to see Bertram's art in that compared to what he's doing now. It almost seems like a different creator. I think House of Penance was 2019. Excuse me. I think it was 2019. So in the 5 years, it really appears like his art has grown by leaps and bounds. And as I was reading that story, there was moments in there where I was thinking, man, Bertram at this stage of his career would have knocked this out of the park. And it's funny because at the time, his art was a real standout. The story was also really interesting, but his art, I remember, just kind of blowing a lot of us away. I think Travis Oddfellow's Thoughts ended up buying a page from that series. But it's amazing to look back at that now, to see where he is now. And it feels like he's one of those artists that at every stage, he's stood out. His style has really stood out, even though his style is sort of in that Mobius, sort of in that Chris Burnham, sort of in that Frank Quietly kind of world. I very roughly put those guys. I would say out of those three, he's probably closer to kind of a Burnham, with some of the detail of the faces, the hatch marks on the faces, even though the structure of the faces and characters aren't the same. There does feel like there's some similarities. But we were talking about this afternoon was that at this point of Precious Metal, he is now Ian Bertram. Like, he now has his own thing. I think now at this point, it's people going to be compared to him as opposed to him compared to other people. I know that there's people that often compare his stuff to Mobius, but I no longer see that. I guess I can see it in some of the line work, but not nearly as much as you maybe could at one point. And like I said, I think that's also due in part to Matt Hollingsworth and his incredible coloring on this one. So it's nice to have been reading comics for this long and still can be amazed by some people's artistic and just creativity within kind of this genre, I guess, or this sort of corner of the reading universe. It's nice to be continually surprised by some artists. So great read. And honestly, revisiting House of Penance was really fun to do. That story to me still stands up. I think it was one of my favorites of that year that it came out. It was still really enjoyable to read again. The other one that we discussed this afternoon, and you can go back to see that conversation because it was one of the very, very few times that Rasa and I disagreed. So this is Helen of Windhorn, the final issue. And my opinion was that I thought that this final issue kind of really, for me personally, knocked it out of the park. I really enjoyed this entire thing. I think 6 issues was a really good chunk. I've said it before on here. I'm not a fan of fantasy. I'm appreciating it a lot more the older I get. When I was younger, it wasn't anything that really interested me too much. I love how they deal with the fantasy with these real people's lives, and kind of the things we were talking about with this first issue is the potential for these people having these issues, and it's this sort of fantastical world that they're creating for themselves. Like, they go out and get shit-faced and get into a bar fight and probably get arrested, but when they come and tell the story, no, we traversed to this other galaxy, this other universe, and we were on this mission, and we had to get a crew, and we had a big fight, and then we went off to get this treasure. Like, they kind of play it up like that. The one thing that I think is important to keep in mind with this, though, is that the woman who is her caretaker, this headmistress, the story is being told through her eyes. So I think one of the concerns, or one of the criticisms that people had this afternoon, was that it felt incomplete. And I was saying that I feel like it's similar to my favorite thing is Monsters Book 2, where you're reading someone's journal, so it's going to feel incomplete because the character whose journal we're reading, they don't have all the answers at this time either. It's sort of this idea that you're going on a journey with this person. So a lot of the stuff that we've been talked to about, she's relaying these stories from what she heard and things that maybe she experienced herself. I love the idea of playing with, because the guy who's interviewing her is very dissatisfied. And I love this idea of, at the end of the day, these people's lives were fucking horrible. She was an alcoholic. Her father killed himself. She's dealing with all sorts of trauma. Her family has some deep-seated mental illness, possibly. She's gonna kill herself by the degrees that she's drinking. So why not tell her story as this kind of fantastical, otherworldly thing where you can sort of downplay some of that trauma? I'm sure it's not my friend that's this quote is attributed to, but I was saying this afternoon, I attribute it to my friend Roger. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. And that goes through my mind when I read this. Don't let the truth of these people's existence stop you from telling a really good story, because that's what this feels like to me. And honestly, I found it was a super nice moment that brought a tear to my eye when the grandfather starts telling her about her father and what an amazing man he was, and telling her about her mother, and telling her about her family history, where she really just is dealing with some shit. He opens up to her, which changes their relationship. And they're both making this decision at this point, specifically this point here, to kind of build a better family together and to kind of take their own relationship to another level. I thought it was a beautiful story, man. I don't have a single issue with it. I feel satisfied with the ending. Endings are fucking difficult. I mean, I can't write a stitch to begin with. I can't imagine what it's like to put together a story and come up with any sort of satisfactory ending that's going to please everybody. We all bring our own shit to these stories at the end of the day. We all bring our own ideas. I really liked it. And, you know, it's one of those things I can see why people love Tom King. I haven't read a ton by him. I've only read, I think, 3 things by him. The Vision, and the Human Target, I think, were the only 3 that I've read. But for my money, this is one of my favorite reads of the year, I think, easily. I really enjoyed the journey. I really enjoyed the art. I really enjoyed that family dynamic. I liked the storytelling. It ends on a really nice point as well, too. This collection of books is gotten rid of, and our last page is this kid who's bought these books and he's laying on his bed, and he's starting to dive into this universe of the writer, which is now going to replay all of that, something for someone else's, from someone else's viewpoint, you know? So I love that idea of passing down these stories. And like any of us, when we're reading these books, there's a lot of people that I read that I don't really look too much into, like the author or the creators and stuff. But there's stuff that really can resonate with you where you kind of want to know more about the creators. I love that in this universe, the creators are a little, it's even their story is a little fantastical, and the way that it's being told and the lack of information, I guess, about them. So yeah, I really liked it. It was a damn good read. Hello, Bubby GTF. I loved it. King said he's definitely going to revisit it. Okay, I don't know how I feel about that. I'd read it. I kind of, yeah, I don't know, man. There's something about revisiting stuff that I just don't feel needs to, like, what's the need to revisit it? What would be the point? I feel like this stands on its own as such a nice story. Revisit a different story. I also understand maybe getting attached to characters and wanting to explore the world some more. I get that as well too. But I really question sometimes people revisiting some things and making it longer. Making things longer or fleshing things out more doesn't necessarily make it better. Leaving some ambiguity, leaving some mystery, leaving some questions unanswered, I think can go a lot farther than crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. Like, some of it should be left up to our imagination. So interesting conclusion. I like that. Thank you very much, Gore. Did you read it, Gore? Did you like it? I liked King's Batman. He writes interesting women. Yeah. I mean, reading from Helena Winhorn, I can see that. I can see that potentially being the case, because they feel very fleshed out. Let's do these next. So Frankenstein issue number 3. Sure. You know, I'm digging it enough. Can I tell you what really happened in this issue? Nah, not really. Out of the creature books that this Universal Monsters, I kind of really dug Dracula so far. This one is a bit of a distant second, but it's okay. I feel like at this point I'm going to stick with it. The art is pretty nice. There's just nothing here that's really drawing me in any big way. It feels more like I'm 3 issues in. I may as well just finish it, as opposed to I want to finish it because I'm really digging the story. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, I only read that first issue and didn't like it right from the jump, so I never picked it up, so I can't tell you much about that one. But this one has just been okay. I couldn't resist picking up a Godzilla one-shot. Every time I go to Galaxy Comics to pick up my pull list, I always look through the comics on the shelves, and there's always a number of Godzilla titles. And honestly, most of them don't really appeal to me that much. But this being a one-shot, I like the art in it. Let's get to the creators here. So, written by Dave Baker, artist is Kevin Anthony Catalan. Colors by Heather Breckel and Kevin Anthony Catalan. The art was pretty nice. The story I thought was kind of crummy. I didn't really like the story. I'm not going to Godzilla to get amazing storytelling, but this one felt really rushed. There was this real drama. There was a real dramatic relationship between this father and son. This father leaves them to go and combat the giant monsters, leaves his kids, the son and daughter. The daughter ends up getting killed. The father is never to be seen again. This guy is now grown up and has kind of written his father off. But with this most recent monster attack, he says, I know that my father is in the kind of contaminated zone. So they cross over to the contaminated zone, and of course they find him. And within a page or two, they've rekindled their relationship and everything is fine again. So to me, that kind of stuff is, I'm not so sure that type of a story works for if you're going to do a one-shot. If you're going to do a one-shot Godzilla, why not make it a smashing up a city monster battle from beginning to end? Might be better served. I know that with Godzilla stories, people love to get the human element in there. And I agree with that. You should have a human element, but I don't know if that works necessarily with a one-shot. What that Godzilla from Hell series did so well was create these really focused one-issue stories that focused on Godzilla. So I think maybe taking a page out of that series book might have been better for this one shot. I'm glad I gave it a shot, but I wouldn't. It's not one I would suggest that you rush out and grab by any stretch. So this is Godzilla Rivals with Space Godzilla, and King Ghidorah is in there as well too, the three-headed dragon. So because I only had a book or two on my pull list, I did try another new book. This one is called Spectrum from Mad Cave. And did anybody else know that it was the 10-year anniversary of Mad Cave? Because I sure as fuck didn't. I had a very quick flip through this. The cover caught my attention. And when I did a quick flip through, I really, really liked the art. It is just one artist throughout this, but he does a pretty good job. Writer is Rick Quinn, and the artist is Dave Chisholm. He does a really good job of kind of changing up his style to reflect the various spots in the story. So we kind of open it up with our main character, who starts kind of, this music is triggering something in her, reminding her of something that she can't quite put her finger on. She gets visited by this otherworldly being saying, "I finally found you. You need to come with me," kind of thing. So we sort of get a little sense that this is we don't know if this woman is some interdimensional being, if she's alien, if she is someone that's been through a bunch of different lives. All of the past that she starts to kind of tap into relates to music, though. So there's these multiple sections where they'll focus on kind of a different musical genre, talk about that time period, and sort of relate it with her character, or maybe some of her past lives, potentially. They don't fully spell it out in this one. And as she goes through, she gets a better sense of who she is, I guess, until this moment here. And she finally kind of leaps free of the confines of being a human, I suppose. I was left scratching my head a little bit. It kind of had elements of Carmen in a strange way. Not in like the suicide and now you're a ghost kind of a way, but there was some elements of it that just kind of struck a chord with me that just reminded me of Carmen. This is not nearly as good as that, let me just say this, but it was good enough that I kind of want to see where a second issue will go. So it's one of those that if I'm not going to put on my pull list, but if I remember, I'll try the second issue. And if I don't remember, obviously it didn't mean that much to me. So possibly something, we'll see. I think this is one that it's too early to tell with just one issue. So maybe it does deserve a second issue to see how they flesh out the story a bit more. So that was Spectrum. And for the last couple, we got 3 more to go here. Let's talk about this one first. So this is NAF issue number 3 that I ordered from a guy named Ethan Llewellyn from the UK, from Bristol, I think is what Rasa was saying this afternoon, which is kind of west of where Rasa lives. She said about an hour and a half drive, which in reality probably means about 2.5 hours drive. So I've seen Ethan Llewellyn on the Manga Chat channel. On the back, he's got a shout out from Simon Hanselman, and he also has one from Daniel Clowes. And Simon Hanselman himself says very Clowesian. He's a bit of a style mimic. I don't know if it's on purpose, which is an interesting thing to say. They are friends. He's been on Manga Chat a few times. I'll say this first. His cartooning is exceptional. I'll also say that the amount of Clowes that's in here really kind of turned me off of maybe picking anything else up. It was a little too much on the nose, even with things like this, the Sados, where he does a very Clowesian thing, or the old style, what Clowes used to do, focus on a particular personality type or traits of people and sort of just kind of make fun of them and mock them. And honestly, that stuff was funny in the 90s. I find when I go back and look at some of that stuff, it makes me cringe a little bit now. I think it's a little bit mean-spirited, and I don't really understand the point of it. At the time, I guess I sort of understood the point of it. This also has shades of what's his name, who does the cowboy stories with the horse. That's what this reminds me of, and I'm completely blanking on his fucking name. So honestly, as good as the art is, because it really is beautiful, and this zipatone that he uses has a really amazing texture on it. It looks like shaded in pencil, which I think is a beautiful look to it. It really gives everything a hand done, colored in feel. I also love that he's not doing anything digitally with the blacks on the page. You can see using a couple of different markers to fill in those blacks, or a marker and maybe black ink, or with a brush to fill in some of those things. So I like seeing that imperfection, but it is so Klaus through the entire thing that it really kind of, it just left me feeling like, well, I guess if I want to read a Klaus thing, I guess I'd go and read Klaus. I hope that, I'm trying not to be too critical, because I don't want it to sound like I'm being a fucking asshole, because that's not my intention. It just didn't work for me as much as I thought it would. I had seen his art before I bought this, so this wasn't a surprise. I knew exactly what I was getting. I follow him on Instagram. I ordered directly from him. I do love supporting these independent artists that are self-publishing, especially. This is a beautifully produced book. I just don't know if I'd go out of my way to pick up or rush out to pick up anything else, if it was going to kind of be this style for the rest of it. It just doesn't necessarily work for me. That said, tune in 6 months from now when I have another comic by him, because that's just the kind of person I am. So the last one I wanted, or the second last one I wanted to talk about, this is The Hammer, and it is from our friend Ryan Carey's 4-Color Apocalypse publishing company. This is 4-Color Apocalypse #1, his first attempt at publishing cartoonists. This is from August 2024. I'm a part of Ryan's Patreon, so I caught wind of this pretty early and ordered a copy from him almost immediately. I love that Ryan is getting into doing some of this. When I was talking to him, he was talking about kind of one of the things he wanted to focus on with his publishing imprint. And this isn't a direct quote, but it was something along the lines of, he wanted to focus on artists who maybe hadn't done comics before, where maybe it's their first comics work, or they're very, very new to it, or they haven't even considered doing comics. He wants to try his best to get very unique voices and bring them into the medium. He's sort of, I feel like sometimes Ryan and Austin English kind of see eye to eye on some of that stuff, trying to push comics a very different direction. And one of the ways to do that is to get people doing comics who don't have all that baggage of reading comics their whole lives, who don't necessarily have that baggage of knowing how you quote unquote should do things and lay out a page and all this. So this is a pretty interesting story. I kind of dug it once I started getting into the feel of it. This first page kind of sets a good tone for the rest of the book. This is a page that we end up seeing, I think, 3 times throughout it, the exact same thing, time and time again. She's dealing with some, surprise, she's dealing with some sort of issues. There's some sort of disorders going on here. There's an eating disorder that's sort of focused on this page here, but that kind of manifests itself in different ways throughout the book. It causes her such pain, I guess, that she finds it hard to focus on anything else. She starts to really hammer this home, and that's where this kind of hammer idea comes to. It's like a banging in her head that she just needs to, she can't figure out how to quiet. So she starts talking about, I find the story of Athena's birth to be a great tragedy. Zeus, terrified of a prophecy that foretold his child with the goddess and his first wife, would be strong enough to overthrow him. He consumed her so she would not be able to give birth, but a goddess can't die. So Métis lived inside Zeus's head watching his life go on as she was pregnant with child. While she was in his head, she built a suit of armor. Day and night, she worked on the forge for clothes her unborn child would wear. It gave Zeus quite the headache. So she uses that as kind of a jumping off point for the rest of the story. Like, she can relate to Zeus because that incessant banging in the head, and you just have to get rid of it somehow. In this case, his head is torn apart, and Athena is born while Métis still exists within him and isn't really talked about much after that. So the rest of the comic, she kind of goes through what that feels like and puts it on the page. And honestly, one of the things that I think works really well is how she lays out the page, how kind of there's times where the panels get more and more and smaller, so the density on the page starts to pick up. It does it at quite a pace that's not over the top, but you feel that sense of imposition and imposing come across the page, and then it gets even more text heavy as you go. So you start to read it almost in kind of like a panicked way, like stuff like this. You read it in sort of an internal dialogue. I think that translates really nicely from the page. So I enjoyed this. This is Daria for, oh my goodness, I apologize for butchering this, Daria. Daria Foruhar is how I'm going to pronounce that because of the capital letters there. So I hope I've gotten that correct. So I'm really excited about Ryan stepping foot into this. I think I'm really curious to see what else he does. So if you know Four Color Apocalypse, if you know Ryan, reach out to him if you want to get a copy of this. I think it's worth your time for sure. Last but certainly not least, so speaking of Austin English, he does this New York comic art symposium, I think is what it's called. It's been going on for a couple of years. He's one of the guys that kind of puts on the events. They're usually chats with a cartoonist. Most often, I believe, I haven't seen many of them, it's a presentation by a cartoonist. I think this new one might have been an interview with the colorist from a book that I had in my collection, actually. I saw making the rounds on social media. Lily and Generoso were talking about how much they loved this talk. I believe the conversation is with the colorist Marguerite Van Cook. An English-born Marguerite Van Cook can include opening for the Clash's Give 'Em Enough Rope tour with her punk band The Innocents, and rock journalist in her resume. Her credits include highboard diving, filming Wire Ballet, a stint working for Russ Meyer, naval historian, novelist, and psychic for Scotland Yard. Her art has been shown internationally. Sorry for struggling there. So this is 7 miles a second. It's from the Vertigo Verite line. I think this was 92. No, 1996 is when this came out. Maybe it was completed in 1992. I think this was something that was independently published before Vertigo got their hands on it, because I remember seeing a different cover that looked a bit different than this one. So I don't know if that was something that they self-published themselves. So the writer is a guy, David Wojnarowicz, and the artist is James Romberger. So David was a writer, performance artist, just artist, who had quite a life from the little bit that I understand from this. I'd never heard of him before this. He died of AIDS. Maybe he died in 1992. I don't remember the details from the backup matter in here. But one of the things he wanted to do was work on a comic about some of his experiences growing up with James. So this is kind of broken up into 3 parts. When he passed away, he expressed some frustrations that this wasn't complete. So he passed away before it was done. James and his partner, this Marguerite, I think that they're married, They had I think they had a tarot card reading where David communicated with them and basically told him, finish the fucking comic, is what it says in here. So that's when he kind of got a fire lit under his ass and finished it up. So the final story, I think, is what that is, where he takes a lot of text from David's journals and does some art for them. But the last part is very, very text heavy, but so worth your time. It's a really nice closer to an amazing single issue comic here. This is dark subject matter, so reader beware. He talks about, from what I understand, he was sexually abused at a very early age, and at a way too early age, he started selling himself on the street. I think this first story, he's about 12 years old in this first one. The second story, he's a teenager. This first one is fucking, it's heavy, man. Like, it doesn't pull any punches right out of the gate here. So we see David kind of hanging out on the street, and we get his internal dialogue, and we get an older gentleman coming to pick him up. This older guy kind of fills the time talking to him about his family and how important this is to keep secret, and how handsome his son has gotten and how beautiful his daughter is. And do you want to get some food? No. Okay, so we're going to go to this hotel. They go to a hotel, and he requests a specific room at that hotel because it has a crack in the door, and he wants David to undress and look through the crack in the door. David says that he'd never seen sex between a man and a woman before. And then we get panels like these down here with this older guy kneeling down in front of him. So it's very, very graphic, but I think it's important. It's an important part of the storytelling, especially when this prostitute turns around and he sees these scars all over her. And that kind of sets a theme that kind of resurfaces at the end. This idea of separating a human from the body and desire from the human, etc. And kind of the disassociation that he definitely feels as he's kind of now full-blown AIDS and kind of almost like about to die is the sense that I get. And he's kind of coming to terms with his existence and his relation to other human beings, and how he can manage it or how he can't manage it. It's a hell of a story. The second one is called Stray Dogs, and that one kind of just continues their life of, they get into these kind of petty crimes. He doesn't necessarily want to sell himself on the street, so they look at other ways to get some money for, I'm assuming, I don't think it's explicitly said in here, I'm assuming maybe drug habits and things. So stuff like this I find really engaging. Rasa said to me the thing that I often hear, what do you get out of reading something like that? Well, I mean, what do you get from reading anything, I suppose? I'd much rather read about people's actual lives than some fucking superhero who's perfect all the goddamn time and starts sending this message to people over times that if you don't behave in this way, you're not a good person. Not that this kind of book excuses any behavior whatsoever. I just find it much more engaging to hear about real people's lives and how they exist in the world. And there's something fascinating about people going through some intense hardships. And there's something really appealing about, again, not as a religious person, this is the one life that we get as far as I understand it. Of course, I could be wrong because I don't know shit. It's amazing that we're here to begin with. But as far as I know, this is the only life that we have. So in some of these stories where you see people making these choices to live that life a certain way, I find fascinating. And I think I find it more fascinating the older I get too. But this kind of thing has always appealed to me, which I think is why comic lines like Vertigo did so much for me as a reader growing up, seeing stuff that was sort of mainstream, but very much outside the mainstream at the same time. Excuse me. So it's amazing that stuff like this was put out there through Vertigo. Again, just shows you the kind of commitment that they had to releasing all kinds of material, publishing all kinds of material. Yes, they ended up releasing and publishing a lot of material by a lot of the same creators, but I do feel like their catalog is so vast that there's these amazing gems that are scattered through it. Like we've talked about with Dark Horse, once you've been publishing for so long, there's so much stuff that really didn't leave much of a blip at the time that it came out that's just ripe for uncovering. So, and I'm pretty sure this is one that I found in a $1 or $2 bin at some point and filed it away with the other Vertigo. So I'm really, really thankful that that this was brought back to my attention. You end up getting so many comics into your collection. There's bound to be a bunch of stuff that kind of passes you by on first look that you pick up with excitement, but then end up filing away. So 7 miles a second, keep your eyes out for that one. I don't think those of you who watch this channel and engage with this channel in the way that I know a chunk of you do, I think you would really dig this book. It's well worth the hunt. The book sounds good. Yeah, I'm glad you think so. It's damn good. Same with me, Terrence. I think you're talking about the type of stories there, Gore. Even from a very young age. Yeah, same with me. There was always this fascination. I think you and I have talked about it before. There was always this fascination from me about the adult world and things that, oh, you're too young to experience that, or you're too young to read that. It's like, well, what do you mean? Then I gotta see what it is. If I'm too young, then there's some sort of mystery there that I'll only understand if I'm an adult. So I want a window into that adult world. So there was also that drive for me as well, for sure. But I've always been attracted to a little more. My wife asked me the same thing about this book when I was talking to her about it. And I said, well, why are you watching Yellowstone? That's not exactly a cheerful show itself, you know. And she couldn't really answer. She's like, well, because I like it. I'm like, well, that's as simple as my answer is too. Like, I like it. I don't really know what else to tell you. And we ended up having the conversation that I think we've had here before, this idea of comics being a medium where there's potential for one human being to sit down and create something and pass that on to one human being, whereas movies, they'll have hundreds of people attached to it and all sorts of information and influence and ideas coming in from all sorts of directions. A comic is that one time where you can get very, very few, 1, 2, or 3 people that are contributing to a story. So you're getting ideas from one human's head right to your human's head, you know, and I find that fascinating. The story reminds me of the kids from Paris is Burning. Okay, I don't know Paris is Burning, Bubby. Is that a movie, I think? Window to the adult world. Yes, yeah. And that is it for what I read. When I went to 204 to see if I had anything on my pull list this week, I didn't have anything. He had a couple of books in. This one was $5. A Chester Gould collection from Feature Showcase. This is Alan Light, 1974, and it is a collection of Dick Tracy strips, and it looks like it's photocopied. The quality of it is unbelievable. I love that it's not the greatest. Unfortunately, because of that, there are some strips that are almost completely, pardon me, that are almost completely whited out because they didn't copy properly. But the rest of it, when you can see it, it's got this great texture to it. So for $5 stinking, I grabbed it without much hesitation. I've got a couple of Dick Tracy things at this point. I haven't fully dug into any of them to some degree. This just reminds me I really should be sitting and reading this stuff. I'm always fascinated by his art. I love the look of it. But like I said, there's something about this kind of really shitty. It's not really blacks. It's more grays. It's all spotty. It makes it feel more legit to some degree. So yeah, Funny's Publishing Company from 1970. What did I say? 72? 74. Yeah, and it doesn't say second print or anything, so I'm assuming this is the first printing of it. So yeah, that was a nice little score there. Documentary about the ballroom scene in NYC in the 80s. Okay, cool. Paris is Burning. I'll have to keep an eye out for that then, Bubby. And with that, I think that's it. Thanks very much for hanging out, everybody. Always good to see you every week. Gore Vidal, Bobby GTF. Who else was in the chat today? I think just the two of you. Nice to see you guys. Thanks for spending the hour with me. And we'll talk to you next weekend. Okay, later.